This week's episode is brought to you by Amber Studio, your creative development partner.
So, like when I went to leave office, people told me I was committing career suicide. They said, why would you leave office, one of the most important parts of this company, to go work on something no one cares about? That was the vice president told me that.
That was Ed Freeze on talking about his decision to move from Microsoft's core business, the Office product, into the upstart little games business that was mostly Flight Simulator back in the 90s. And oh my gosh, how far have they come? They own everything now.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Microsoft Game Studios, it's bonkers.
Yeah, what'd they just buy? Blizzard was the biggest?
Activision, yeah. Activision, Blizzard.
It's owned by Blizzard, yeah. Game Pass.
I was counting up. I didn't mention this before, but I at some point I was looking at somebody had published out this chart of all the franchises that are now under Microsoft's umbrella, and you can look at all the first-person shooter games.
Oh, all the games.
And it's like most of them. It's like, there's Doom, there's Gears of War, there's
Halo,
Call of Duty. Yeah, there's Halo. There's like, it's bonkers. It's bonkers.
That is crazy.
I had the good fortune of working with Ed back in the early Halo days at Microsoft. And you're all going to get a chance to meet him here in a minute.
Yeah, he was great. He's a great storyteller, by the way.
Yeah, and just like super down to earth, chill, very smart. It's just a great person to work with. And you and I have had the privilege, I would say, to continue working with him through Look North World and his investment company, OneUp Ventures, which is also, it's a very unique kind of style of venture capital company, and really cool to be part of that community. So very thankful for Ed for sharing some of his time with us today. What's happening in your world? This is rare for us. It's like pretty early in the morning. It's like the crack of dawn over here. The sun is bare. I am totally a morning person. Yes.
No, you're not. Alex is not a morning person.
What are you talking about?
You're not the same person in the morning. I know you.
That's fair.
At 11 a.m. you become the Alex I know.
Yeah, but I'm up early though. So you're saying I'm different.
Yeah, you have your coffee, you eat, you like sorts through some stuff.
This is my personal time though. My personal time. This is why you and I don't really hang out this early, because this is the time where everybody else in the house is asleep and I can
can do something.
I can get myself organized. I always have my book with me in the morning.
Oh, your book you write in. I kind of wish I wrote in my book still. I don't anymore. I do everything in Apple Notes, the little notepad thing.
Yeah, how do you deal with this? I'm trying to figure out. I have a bunch of people who I met and talked to pre-EA. So this is like before 2019.
Okay.
And that computer, like when we went from pre-2019 to post-2019, I got a new computer. Everything that was on the old computer is backed up on this hard drive. I can't search my email and like, oh, I remember talking to this person. You just get an email and search it. I can't search any of that stuff because it's like on how do you have access to like 10-year-old emails and stuff like that?
I do.
You just keep everything on the same computer?
It's in the cloud. Google has it all.
In the cloud. I wasn't using Gmail back then.
Oh, you weren't? Oh, yeah. You were using like AOL mail. Alex.
AOL. No, just like guy. I had a mail client, just Apple Mail. Yeah. It's like I would actually inbox zero. I would file everything in the folders.
Yeah. I think that's only a problem for people like you, to be honest, because I'm not
a hoarder.
A hoarder. Oh yeah, I'm a hoarder too. I have a bunch of plastic I need to paint. Anyways, yeah, I think people that are, because you're a networking guy, and you network. That's
you mean
your
plug cables in, or I talk to people? Which one?
You talk to people. Yeah. So I think that's something that you think about, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that conversation with that one person about this one thing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Where is it?
I mean,
how do I get a hold of them?
That's my job. I mean, that's what I do is I just talk to people. I'll be on my cell.
Right. And I have the same vibe with art I've done. or art that I've
like
or
you
reference
remember
art.
stuff you did like 12
Yeah.
years ago. It's like, where's that
Exactly.
thing?
Where's that thing?
Yeah.
So I have that same issue where I have hard drives that are 25 years old.
I think this is a moment in time. It's probably going away now. Like my kids won't have this problem, but like because we bridged this transition between people having their digital life on their computer versus having their digital life on the cloud, we have all sorts of scraps that are on old computers or not actually in the cloud. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it.
Yeah, and it's going to be a perfect way to reset the entire planet. Like imagine when everybody's life is online
and then it gets
you just deleted. It's like
that'll be the apocalypse. It'll be the digital apocalypse. People will freak out.
It's like
somebody should write a book about that. All right, let's roll our chat with Ed Fries. It's a good one.
Yeah, I really like this conversation. I have something to say, and I didn't know if I should say this. I have a lot of kids. I have 4 kids, and I'm going to have a 5th kid. Okay, there's one on the way.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I want to say is you're not supposed to pick a favorite, right? And tell everybody.
That's right.
But this one might be one of my favorite podcasts. Dude, I did not expect this guy to be this cool. I was like, what? I'm like, I wonder what it's like working for that guy. You know, like he's a really good storyteller. I was really impressed. So I was like, you're not supposed to. And I'm like, I like every podcast we've done, but I thoroughly enjoyed listening to him tell stories.
Me too. I enjoyed this conversation a bunch.
It's a good one, folks.
I hope you enjoy it too, and we'll see you on the other side.
Cheers.
Hello, friends and listeners. Welcome to this week's episode of The Fourth Curtain, and a very special episode it is indeed, as we have with us one of my favorite people in the game industry. Hold on, I got to see if he's blushing just a little bit. Mr. Ed Fries.
You warned me you'd be lying in the intro, so it's okay.
Apart from being the mastermind behind the original Xbox product slate and rollout, Ed was my firstest and bestest boss.
Till you quit me.
Well, you know, I didn't want to wear out my welcome. I had the pleasure of working with Ed during those exciting days when the Xbox came out and Halo launched. Ed had been at Microsoft for much longer than I, joining, I think I got this right, at least I looked it up on Wikipedia. You joined Microsoft in 1986, which was the year that Microsoft went public.
I was an intern in 85, joined full-time in 86. After they went public, I will point out.
There's some mechanic there that matters, I guess. But was Microsoft in Albuquerque before, or was it just Bill Gates was in Albuquerque? Was it Albuquerque some part of the story?
Correct. Yeah, they started in Albuquerque in 1975. Right.
Okay.
They were across the street from Altair, the makers of the first personal computer.
Okay, but in 86 they were in Seattle, right?
Correct. Yes, we in Redmond, Bellevue.
So the public before, like, what's with the public and not public? Like, was it a very good thing?
Interns don't get stock options. When I joined full time, I got stock options, but I joined full time. I joined right after they had gone public. So.
Oh snap! Okay,
so all summer long, the stock options, I watched them. The stock actually went down all summer, and I was like, oh, I missed it. I missed out my chance. Turned out not to be true in the longer picture, but at the time, it was a long summer.
I'm not sure we're going to play the
sympathy on this.
Yeah, the sympathy violin for that one. I think it probably worked out okay.
It worked out okay.
But let's see. I'm halfway. You know, sometimes I don't get through the intro.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
no,
on.
No. This is
takes
par
like
for the course.
And a half to get through half the intro.
But before Microsoft, Ed was making games for the Atari or an Atari.
Atari 800.
The 800. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that must have been, is that like high school?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
So,
high school? What?
High school.
Yeah.
And then I don't recognize the name Tom Saxton, but there was a Tom and Ed's Bogus Software.
Correct. True.
Which I do know made the fish screensaver, because I remember that talking to you about that at some point. And
I have a long entrepreneurial career. It goes way back.
Well, for the kids listening who don't know what a screensaver is, does anybody use a screensaver anymore? I don't know if that's a thing. But Adobe had the After Dark. Like I had all of those screensavers, and the
They
aquarium,
were
I guess,
after
was
mine.
yeah. So you made a fish screensaver. Did it become was the one that After Dark had? Was that yours, or did they just rip it
Oh,
off?
we are getting into the questions even before we finish the intro. All right. Yeah, I can. Let's talk about fish.
It was a question as I was reading.
We could talk about the aquarium one the whole hour. That was a great.
So I was writing games in high school. Somebody saw a game that I made called Froggy, which was a Frogger clone. I was a high school kid making pizzas. I worked at Shakey's and writing games on the side. And these guys walked in and they're one day and offered me a job to make games for them. And they had tracked me down from California. It just said "Buy Eddie Freeze" on my Froggy game, and somehow they
Wait,
found.
hold on, time out. Did you go by Eddie when you were in high school?
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. That was a big mistake. Yeah, see, I'm off to a bad start already.
This is fantastic.
No, actually, if you look at Halo 2600, it says "By Eddie Freeze" on Halo 2600 as it's
Nice.
for the few people who would get that. We can talk about that later. But yes, Eddie, I was Eddie until when I was full-time at Microsoft, I became Ed, just much more serious. I had my own office. I had a sign.
You get a shorter email address, right? I mean, did you get Ed F? You got Ed F. Yeah.
Well, I went to college in 82 and I made games for this company 82, 83. The entire game industry melted down famously, kind of end of 83, beginning of 84. I had to get a real job to pay for my college. So I worked for a little software company in the Seattle area between my sophomore and junior year, summer 84. And when I went around and interviewed with companies at that time, several people said, "Did you apply to Microsoft?" And I was like, "Microsoft? They'd like DOS?" I mean, no, I didn't. But but then the next year, I sent a resume to Microsoft, and they immediately called me at school. I went to school in New Mexico, by the way, even though I grew up in the Seattle area. And they flew me out from New Mexico to be interviewed, and they offered me this job as an intern. So anyway, summer 85, I go in and I'm working on in the tutorial group. They used to make little animated not animated, but little tutorials with ASCII characters to teach you how to use their DOS products like Multiplane and Word. And it was an awesome job. All the real programmers, all three of them on that team, were working on the Windows version of the tutorial system. So they turned the DOS version over to the intern. And so it was cool because I was making the tool that right down the hall these writers and artists were using. And so they would come to me and say, "Hey, can you make it do this? And then, can you make it do that?" And I'd make a few changes and I'd be like their hero. Your customers are right there. So one day this woman who worked there came into my office, and her name was Janet Vogelzang, and she was doing a dentist office. And she's like, "Every time I've ever been to the dentist, there was a fish tank and little fish swimming in it. Is there some way you can make it so I can do that?" And I'm like, "I'm a video game programmer. Of course I can do that." So I added this just simple looping animation system so she could draw little frames of animation of these fish swimming in this little tank. And this is all ASCII art, right? All slashes and asterisks and everything.
I was going to ask.
Just to be clear.
Okay. So you wrote like an ASCII art renderer or something?
It already had a fixed renderer, right? And then I made it. I gave it a little looping animation capability for this particular request. So she she got it running and it looked cool. And I'm like, "Hey, can you make me some more fish?" And she's like, "Sure." I'm like, "I just have this crazy idea." So she gave me a bunch of bigger fish, all made out of slashes and asterisks and everything. And then that night, I just stayed a few hours late, and I made a full screen aquarium with these ASCII fish that swim back and forth. And every once in a while, they'd spit out a little O or a big O, and it would float to the top. And there was seaweed at the bottom waving with parentheses made out of parentheses and stuff like that. And that was fish. And the program was called Fish! Just like my Frogger clone was Froggy. I'm not very creative. Anyway, so I go, I'm back to work doing other stuff. And I start to see my thing running on other people's machines at night. And it's like people just were passing around my fish program, and people would just start it up before they went home because they thought it looked cool. So, after a few weeks, I'm walking home and I just see screen after screen running fish on my way out. I was like, oh, that's cool. So anyway, so that may be the first screensaver. I don't know. Ask a software historian.
It is. I mean, according to my intro, it is. You invented the screensaver.
Okay. So anyway, so the next year I joined full-time to work on Excel. And I was the youngest of 7 programmers working on the first version of Excel for Windows. And I had to learn Windows. And so I'm like, I'm just going to make a little Windows fish. So I made a little Windows fish program. And then like 18 months later, we shipped that and we started working on the Mac version of Excel again. And so I had to learn the Mac. So I made a Mac version of Fish. And then I ran into this guy, Tom Saxton, who he worked on the Word team, and he was a really good Mac programmer. And I was doing some tricky things on the Mac. I was the fish swim on the Mac version on the background behind the windows. Anyway, and he's like, it would be really cool if there was an editor where you could make fish. And so I'm like, that would be cool, Tom. Why don't you write that? See, I'm already management material at this point. So Tom makes an editor, and we combine our things together. And there were other people at Microsoft at this time. This was before the Windows. Well, the very Windows 1 had been released, which you didn't even have windows you could move, but Windows 2 hadn't come out yet. There were other people making little Windows things on the side, and they call themselves bogus software just because it was funny. It's like there was Microsoft software, and then we made bogus software on the side. Anyway, several different things were part of bogus software. So Fish became part of the bogus software collection, kind of, Fish. I just said, by bogus software. And then anyway, I teamed up with Tom. Tom made an editor, and Tom and I decided we would release this thing as kind of freeware. And so we put it out. This is before the internet. We're talking like 1988 at this point. But it would go up on bulletin boards and go around. And so we decided to we couldn't call it bogus software. We decided to call it Tom and Ed's bogus software, just to be specific about whose bogus software was, I guess. So anyway,
how is it you got second billing there? Because like it
sounded better. Ed and Tom's, it doesn't roll off the tongue. Tom and Ed's.
And you're still at Microsoft, right, during this time?
Oh yeah, I'm at Microsoft for the next 18 years. Hang in there.
I just didn't know you could do that. That's why I'm asking. Like, did you?
This was way before there were work on the side policies or anything like that.
Yeah, okay, all right. Just figured.
When I finally quit, almost 20 years later, they pulled up my employee agreement, and they're like, "Oh shit, we got nothing on him. we can't." It's like a 1-page thing. It's just like you work here. So we put this thing out, and we just leave our address and say, send us some fish. If you make something cool, send them to us. And we started getting mail. We'd get these mail, and it would, some of them would include discs, but some of them would include checks. And so people would just like send us a $5 check or a $10 check. And pretty soon these checks are stacking up. We didn't ask for money, and so we're like, okay, we got a couple problems. We can't cash these things. I use Tom and I'm Ed. We go to the bank. Let us. No, that didn't work. So we had to actually form a LLC called Tom and Ed's Bogus Software, so we could cash the checks. And then we're like, well, there's other shareware stuff out at this point. We're like, maybe we should actually ask for money. So in the next version, we made it so that you had to pay a little to unlock the editor. And then we started getting checks, a lot more checks from all over the world and all this stuff. But anyway, while all this stuff was happening, Berkeley Systems was doing their flying toasters. Screensaver became very popular. And they wanted to also have a fish in, and they were cool guys. So instead of just ripping us off, they called us up and said, hey, would you write the fish module for our thing? Then, we can compensate you for ripping you off. So I'm like, sure. So we wrote the fish module for that. And anyway, and the worst problem of the fish thing, I mean, it was really super fun. I mean, for years we're getting checks literally from all over the world. I don't know if the beginning of Bungie was like this, but it would be like Timbuktu, you know, like, was that a real place? Yeah, there's a check from Timbuktu. You know, we would get all these foreign currencies, like checks in other countries we couldn't cash and all this stuff. So we're like, those are piling up, you know. And people would be funny, really funny letters. One of the things is when we put out the shareware version, we got a post office box and you know, just a little post office box down the street, and so I would go there a couple times a week and pick up the letters. And but we figured out that you didn't have to say PO box. Our box number was A3334, but we could instead say sweet A3334, and it would still go to the post office box. So that was our address, was sweet A3334.
That's cool.
And so, you know, I go in one day and I unlock it, and there's like a note in the box, and I pull out the note and it says, I came by to visit your suite, in quotes, but discovered it's best measured in inches. So I was like, oh, that was cool. That was what our fans were like. They were
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. We never got a check from Timbuktu. Yeah, I don't even know what kind of currency Timbuktu has, if that's real.
Is that a real place?
It's a real place. It's a place. So I was going to say, well, just one last thing there. The worst part about it was that, do you ever collect like anything weird? If you know, like, let's say you're somebody who like is into owls, then like everybody who sees like a crappy owl on vacation, they think you want it. And that's what happened to me with fish. And so I was, all of a sudden I was like the fish guy at Microsoft, and like my office was just like filled with fish all over, you know, all these different random things. I mean, at first it was funny, but after a while there's just like fish everywhere, you know. Anyway, so that's
that part. I didn't know that part of it. And actually, I didn't. That's cool that Berkeley actually called you up and said, "Hey."
It was cool. Yeah.
That wouldn't happen today, I don't think. People aren't like that anymore.
There's still some cool people out there. Come on.
Maybe. I guess. I kind of think of you as sort of like the godfather of video games. I don't know when you started doing this, if it was right after you left Microsoft, but like you've been since then, that time, been helping developers, either the advice or, you know, like investment or being on boards, things like that, really helping companies be creative and make games. And, you know, sometimes I've done, you know, our company has raised VC money. Some of which from you. Thank you very much. But a lot of investors have a very, I don't know how to characterize it. Maybe I could say a lot of investors are afraid to invest in like content or in a game.
Right.
But you're not. And I think that's in some ways it's almost like plus. You know, it's like you're supporting the art of our industry as well as the business. So that's kind of why I don't know if it's if you think it's complimentary when I say I think of you like the Godfather.
I see.
The game industry is like somebody who's we could all go to for advice, but you're also going to help us. You know, maybe in sometimes whether we deserve it or not. But when did you start doing that? Was that like?
Well, I mean, let me back up a little. I mean, first of all, I grew up in a family with two technical parents. They met in college and both moved out here to work out to the Seattle area to work for Boeing. My dad was an electrical engineer. My mom was a chemical engineer. Then my mom had us kids and then went back to college and got a master's in computer science. So I had a double E dad, CS mom. So we had lots of like technical stuff in the house, and I learned to solder early and make stuff out of little parts. But also like dad would bring home programmable calculators, and mom would like bring up a dial-up terminal and dial up to, you know, office at DEC, and I could play really early computer games, and I loved these games. You know, I love like board games and stuff like that as a kid, D&D, typical game industry stuff.
Your mom worked for Digital Equipment.
Yeah. So she worked for Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that was our first computer. It was a DEC Rainbow growing up.
Oh yeah, Rainbow. Yeah, I worked on the Rainbow a little bit when I worked on the Summer '84.
Ran CPM.
Yeah, there was a period of these IBM PC compatibles, sort of in quotes. You couldn't run. Yeah, they were just similar, and you needed to make some changes. That was one of them. But anyway, so as a kid, I kind of fell in love with technical stuff and fell in love with programming, but also video games, and just games in general. And so, when I got the Atari 800, as I was going into high school, I just, disappeared in the basement and like learned everything about how this machine works, and basic and then assembly language. But I had done some earlier stuff that made that easier for me, and then I just started making games. So my whole life, really, up till now, I mean, I'm in a room that you can't really see, but it's an arcade. I've had a love for games, and and also building and making stuff from a technical point of view. I love to do that. And so when I worked on versions of Excel over a 5-year period, and our team went from 7 people up to 50 people. And I went from the youngest person on the team to being the lead programmer and managing a small team. And then they moved me over to Word, and I worked on Word for another 5 years as the dev manager. And I got to program on Word, but also manage a 60-person team. And so then the next step for me in my career was to run a business. But that was kind of a scary jump for me, because I love to program. I still program. I love to make stuff. And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to give that up, what else do I really love? And the only other thing I really loved was games. I was like playing games like your games back then. I had played Myth before I came over to run the games business in 1980 or 1996. So beginning of 96, I took over Microsoft's game business. And then that's all that stuff. I grew Microsoft's game business from a small team up through a bunch of acquisitions and bigger, and then through Xbox. And I don't know how much you want to talk about all that. But then, yeah, so I think what you're saying is that I have a legitimate passion for this area. I don't do it for money. I mean, it's sort of my life's work, and I love to. For me, it's so satisfying to see the game business continue to grow and take over the world. I think it's the most important medium in the world. It's superior to all the ones that came before it, and we're gonna conquer the world. We got a few places left. We're China. We crushed it in China. We're taking over India. We got the Middle East and South America are both coming in, and then Africa, and we're done.
Yeah.
Oh, Antarctica. Sorry, Antarctica. Then we're done. Anyway. So
is there gaming happening on the ISS? There's got to be.
There's got to be.
Got computers up there.
Yeah. There's got to be. Are they allowed to take their phones up there? They must, right?
I don't know.
I remember reading that Obama couldn't keep his iPhone when he got elected. He had to go to a BlackBerry.
Yeah, I don't think they do that anymore.
All right, but the Microsoft game business, I think our listeners probably want to hear a lot about that. And I am curious what it was like when you got there. So what was it like when you that was 19, when was that?
Yeah, kind of. I think I interviewed end of 95 and I joined start of 96. So it was an amazing time in the game business to kind of, for me, to be going back into the game business after the meltdown in the early 80s. Not as just a player and fan, but as somebody who was involved in making games. And it was such an incredible time, because it was the time that games were really moving from 2D to 3D. The first graphics accelerators were starting to come out. The first, things like the Sound Blaster card to make. So you had great, great music. You had great 3D graphics. You had CD-ROMs and the whole CD-ROM thing. And so all of a sudden you could have some really high fidelity and a lot of data behind what you were doing. And so it was a really important time for the growth of the industry, but also a time where there were a lot of technological problems to solve. Games are really good at sort of staying at the cutting edge of technology. We see that now with game people out there playing with AI. It's like the most coolest thing we got going on right now. And so yeah, it was a great time to come over. I wasn't sure what I would find when I came over there. Microsoft is like, at least back then, there was sort of a hierarchy of nerds. It's like the systems nerds were the top nerds, the operating system nerds, because they were the nerdiest. And then there was the applications nerds. And then there was the, below that would be the consumer nerds, the games and the, CD-ROM music and stuff like that. Anyway, so when I went to leave Office, people told me I was committing career suicide.
Right.
They said,
yeah.
They said,
what are you doing? What are you doing?
Why would you leave Office, one of the most important parts of this company, to go work on something no one cares about? That was the vice president told me that. And so I wasn't really sure what I was getting into, but I came over, and honestly, the group was great. There were some very experienced game people. Stuart Mulder would be a great example. He worked at Sierra back in the day. Well, of course, you worked, Alex, with Stuart.
Yeah.
Bungie and Halo was in Stuart's group. But there were many, many others, and many women in the team too. You had people like Shannon Loftus and Bonnie Ross and Kiki Wolfkill, many of whom some of whom are even still there.
We had Shannon on twice actually.
Oh yeah, Shannon's awesome. So Shannon and I are on the board of the IGDA Foundation, supporting diversity in the game business, and that's something we also do through OneUp Ventures, my fund. So, talked to just exchanged email with Shannon today, actually. So
tell her we said hi.
so not only were there some very good people there, but there were also some very interesting projects. So, I had been on the side when I was running Word development. I was a big real-time strategy player, Command and Conquer, Red Alert. I started with Dune 2. So I went over there and they showed me this little RTS they were making with these guys in Dallas, Texas, called Ensemble Studios. And that was, of course, Age of Empires. Age of Empires. I say it and people think I say Age of Vampires.
Who signed Age? Was that Stuart? Was that Shannon?
It would be in Stuart's group. It may have been Ed Ventura was probably the guy who put the deal together.
Okay, right on.
Just to try to remember some names from the old days.
Yeah.
But they had some sports games that they were doing. They had some 3D stuff with Terminal Reality, another great Dallas company.
Oh yeah,
a game called Fury Cubed for us, and then they did a game called Hellbender, which there's a funny story about. So there was a lot of games in a lot of different categories under development. They had just acquired BAO, the makers of Flight Simulator, and so one of the first things I did was help move that team out, get them settled, because Flight Simulator was the cash cow for the group. So we had like a way to make money, and so that was really the plus of the job. We had a way to make money, and no one cared what I was doing. So you put those two things together, and it was like, after I realized, I was like, I'm a kid in a candy store. I can do whatever I want. Somebody came into my office. I remember it really vividly, and they were working on an F1 racing game, and they came in, and I had only been on the job a few weeks, and it's like, hey, we've got the F1 contract. It needs your signature. And I'm like, okay, I'm a programmer. I mean, I'm like, I'm pretending to be the boss here. All right. And then, I look at this contract and I'm like, it says it's $1 million contract. And then it's got like a spot for me to sign. I'm like, I'm going to have to get back to you on this. I go to my boss, a woman named Charlotte Guyman, and I'm like, can I sign this system for $1 million? And she's like, do you think we should do it? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And she's like, then you should sign it. And I'm like, okay. 3 months into the job, she quits. And so then I lost like whatever adult supervision I had. So I'm like, all right, I'm winging it. This is good.
How long did it take for you to go from, I don't know what to do with $1 million deal like this, to, okay, I know how to evaluate this now?
Well, it's funny. It was because I was like, I'm new at this, but I could ask questions, and I'd be like, that game you shipped last year, did it make any money? They're like, we don't know. We got no way to tell. Like, how come we can't tell? Well, actually, Microsoft doesn't have an accounting system that works for small games like we put out. They're just used to doing like Excel and Word. They just like huge piles of cash come in, you know?
That's crazy.
And I'm like, really? That's the way it works, you know? And so it was like, they're like, yeah, you know, so like, well, could we make our own? So we had to like build our own little accounting system to like be able to track our own products to be able, you know, and it was just, yeah, I'm just like trying to make up common sense stuff. Like it would be, what if we could predict, you know, what if we could like make a decision based on like how much money we think it's going to cost to make the game and how much money we think we're going to get back. And then we'd know. Right, like everybody's like, oh yeah, maybe we could do that somehow. You know, it's like you're inventing business from scratch or something. You know, but meanwhile you have like this huge company behind you, so it's like if you want to like, I think maybe we should buy this company. Like, okay, and then all these suits line up. We'll make it happen, you know, like, you know, and so
that sounds vaguely reminiscent. Like, yeah,
right, yeah, and so
we need Bungie. Let's buy it.
Yeah, so because there's like, yeah, or like once you could get a product in a box, then it goes like to a different part of the company I like never dealt with. Whereas like it gets distributed all over the world. It gets, yeah, all this stuff that you used to do by hand, which is right. I never had to deal with that at all. It's like I think maybe once I had to go and give a pep talk to the sales team. I'm not sure how well that went, but you know, where I at least demoed some products or something, but yeah. So you had sort of these facilities that you could tap into around HR or other things. Like I said, like acquisition and of course, like a nearly infinite pool of money if you needed it. So, I mean, it's hard to screw it up, really.
I guess. I don't know if we ever had this conversation, but I after being at Microsoft and then I was at Disney for a while, it was very striking to me that going from a company that I guess you could say from the outside looks like a software company, Microsoft,
yeah,
to a company that from the outside looks like a creative company, Disney, that the sort of the decision-making culture almost seemed flipped, you know? Like I remember we would sit around the table and you would ask us like, okay, we're reviewing a milestone for a game. What do we think?
Yeah.
And the conversation was about the game.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, well, this was really fun because this blah, 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 or not, or whatever. And at Disney, most of those sort of decision-making conversations were on a spreadsheet and a P&L, you know, like how are we doing on the ship date? If we're late, like what's this going to do to P&L? Like what do the comps look like? Right. It is just very striking to me. And maybe that is because it was early days and you were in some ways left to sort of figure it out, maybe.
I think there's a couple different things. I mean, one is like, I'm a product guy. I mean, that's my whole life is like making stuff, building things. And so that I always start there. Right. I've never been a sales and marketing guy. I had some good marketing partners along with the way, Beth Featherstone. And by the way, marketing never reported to me. Like ultimately when I got some amount of adult supervision through Robbie Bach, you know, he knew not to give me the marketing team. You know, he's like, I'll hang on to sales and marketing because he knows I don't know anything about that. But the head of marketing always would come to me and say, hey, I really work for you. So I'm like, okay, great. But as long as we know that, then we'll go. But so I definitely am a product first kind of thinker. I mean, but you know, you got to look at the other stuff too sometimes. But as far as Disney goes, they brought me in after I left Microsoft. They brought me in. And I did some consulting with them, and they had the entire game business under their consumer products division. I think it still is what's left of it, and that's I think the main thing that you're seeing. Like, I would when I was talking to him, I'm like, you wouldn't treat your film business this way, right? You wouldn't run it like, you know, like to be more clear, consumer products at Disney is like licensing Mickey Mouse for T-shirts, stuff like that. So those are the guys who control the game business. So if you license Mickey Mouse to be on a T-shirt and it loses money, I mean, you're going to lose your job. That's like, what are you doing here? So but that's not the way they treated the film business. Film's a hit-driven business. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. So trying to put a creative hit-driven business under the guys who make T-shirts, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that's why they've continued to suffer. I mean, for 20 plus years in that business.
So in those, I guess, I don't know, would you think about your time at Microsoft as before Xbox and after, maybe?
Yeah, definitely.
So in the period before Xbox sort of started, were there any signals from up top, like, Bill Gates, etc., that games were understood at all? Like, did Bill play games at all, or did you ever have conversations about like, oh, here's what we're doing, here's what's worked in, here's where we're probably going, kind of thing?
From the very start at Microsoft, I felt like I was supported by upper management. Like, I had a few chances to meet with Bill over the years, and maybe managed to make a decent impression or something. And so I always felt like they kind of had my back. But also, I think Bill is a closet gamer, honestly. And whenever we could, like, which wasn't very often, maybe once every couple of years, we could get him to come over and just like look at some products and stuff. You could tell he's having fun, But probably one of the most, I mentioned a story about the game called Hellbender earlier. Let me just tell that now because it sort of answers your question. So it's our second year that I'm there, and we're trying to, like, imagine like the rest of Microsoft's biggest concern about the game business was not like whether we'd lose a little money or something. It was that we would somehow tarnish the Microsoft brand. The one thing that they had that they held sacred, this word Microsoft on their box, they thought that we were going to somehow mess it up, and it would, and that would be bad if, just to make a little bit of money in the tiny game business, we screwed up this brand that was used by Word and Excel and Windows. But we, in the game business, we wanted to do more stuff. We were feeling kind of like we couldn't do first-person shooters, but first-person shooters were the hottest category, and it was like Doom and Quake, and it was like Bloody and Demons and all this stuff. We couldn't do anything like that, but we're trying to push back, make a little more room for the future. And so our marketing guys had this thing, we're going to come up with like kind of edgy names for our products for this year. And so we had this underwater kind of FMV game, if you remember those. It would play like a video and then you have some limited control.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a game that they ended up calling Deadly Tide. And so to have Microsoft and then Deadly on it was like, ooh, very edgy. And then the other one, and also for another reason I'll get to in a minute, but also, and then the sequel to Fury Q'd, Mark Randall's game, Terminal Reality, they wanted to call it Hellbender. So Microsoft and Hell together. Ooh, I know, spicy. So
did you get a call? Like when the name was on the
no, so what happened was we had to go and get approval from the head of marketing, Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates. Okay. This goes so all the way to the top. Like maybe no one cares about what I'm doing except if I put names like this next to. So we go into this big meeting and it's very tense. And our marketing guys present, these two ideas. And we were actually more worried about Deadly Tide. And the reason was because of Tide, the laundry soap. And so
okay.
So Steve Ballmer worked at Procter & Gamble on Tide before he came to Microsoft. And Bob Herbold, who was then the president of the company, also worked at Procter & Gamble before he came to the company. So Tide meant something else too. So anyway, so our guys get up there and they present, they're talking about Deadly Tide and they show some of the cool stuff from the game and the Hellbender. And before anyone else can say anything, Bill says, I like it. And we look over and, Herbal and Balmer are kind of biting their tongues. And, they're like, okay, he likes it. Well, all right, our work here is done. And so we leave. And those were the names we shipped with us. So it was nice.
Oh, awesome.
We were,
Don't sell past yes. Yeah. Got the I like it.
Exactly.
So how did Xbox start? Like, how did that come on the radar?
Yeah. So by 1998 or so, we had grown our share in the market quite a bit. The games group was up to maybe 400 or 500 people at that point. We had done several acquisitions, great companies like FASA Interactive, Jordan Weissman, those guys. And Ensemble Studios was fully on board at that time too. And it was just getting harder and harder to grow our market share. We were getting kind of into the teens, maybe low 20s, and EA was maybe around 30. And so I was thinking about where else we could go with our games. And I was thinking, well, we haven't done anything in the console world. The console world just seems so alien to what we were doing. We were making these PC games, and they looked, especially back then, I mean, console games looked like some things for kids, and we were doing, multiplayer stuff and on PCs. Anyway, it's just the market seemed very far apart. And I'm thinking about this stuff. And then one day these guys from the DirectX team walk in my office, and it's, Seamus and a handful of other people. And they have this idea for this thing they call the DirectX box, or Xbox for short. And it's going to be a PC running Windows that's in a box that makes it look like a game console, but it's really just a straight up PC running current version of Windows. But it has like a little overlay on top of the software that makes it look like a console interface. And so back then when you'd stick a game in a PC, it would install it to the hard disk. So it would do all that, but it would pretend it's not. It would pretend, so it's basically like a PC pretending to be a game console. That was the original pitch. Bottom line.
That's awesome.
Okay, so they're just like a handful of guys from the DirectX team, which is from the evangelists. They're evangelists for DirectX. They're not even the guys making DirectX. So
this is a theory.
They have very little political clout in the company. I'll just say that. And they certainly don't have the capability to make any games. And so that's why they came to me, because they needed some support. And so I'm like, wow, I'm thinking this could be really good, because I've got all these PC games. I could easily port them to this new console, in quotes, because it's just a PC. This is a great way for us to get into the console business, is my naive thinking, which is very naive.
Well, that was exactly my thinking too, when I turned to Peter and said, hey, we should call Microsoft about this Xbox thing.
You're getting a little ahead of the story, but we'll get there in about a year. Anyway, so I agreed to help them and started to attend some of their meetings, and they slowly gathered more supporters. And then, as often happens when there's a project inside Microsoft, we started to run up against another team that also wanted to make a game console. And that was the guys from the Windows CE team. And they had, it was just the 25th anniversary of Dreamcast yesterday. They had paid Sega a bunch of money to put a little Windows logo on the Dreamcast, because there was a way to reboot the Dreamcast in a version of Windows CE.
Really?
Yeah, which everyone forgets. Go look at your Dreamcast. You'll see this little logo. Nobody ever did it. No one ever did it. And so, but that was their first step. And their next step was to make this game console. And so in Microsoft, sometimes there's these political territory fights. And so then there had to be this big fight over which group was going to get to do this thing. And so this would be early 99. We had to have a big meeting with Bill and Steve to decide which group was going to get to make this console, or at least get to figure out a plan to potentially make it. And so we go and we have this big meeting. It's wall-to-wall vice presidents. We have a bunch of vice presidents on our side. They have a bunch of vice presidents on their side. They go first and they present this thing that's like, it's basically like a PlayStation clone. It's custom hardware, custom software, blah, blah, blah. And then we go next, and I'm just there for moral support when I say we. So it's, it's the DirectX guys, but they get up there and they just do this amazing job. And this is like all Microsoft speak, but they're like, ha, it's like, ha, ha, ha. Well, wasn't that an interesting presentation? It's like, it's so off strategy. This is like the most insulting thing you can say to a plan at Microsoft. It's so off strategy. And so what off strategy means at Microsoft is it means you're not taking advantage of all the other parts of Microsoft. They're going to make their own hardware. Microsoft doesn't make hardware, and they're going to make their own software. I mean, system software. What about Windows? I mean, let's look at a plan that's on strategy, and then they present, we're going to make these, ours is based on, existing PCs. We're going to work with our OEM partners that we already have. They're going to make the machines for us. We're going to run Windows, the existing software. It's all on strategy, and so.
And Bill said, I like it.
Bill said, I like it. And we walked out of that meeting and we won. And all those guys, half of them had to join the Xbox team to keep working on games. They because their thing went away. And so then out of that meeting, we were granted a year to come up with the real plan for, okay, come back to us in a year with the big plan for this. And we did a bunch of stuff during that year. We actually had a meeting with Nintendo to see if there was a way we could cooperate with them, because that's something Bill wanted us to look into. Bill met with Kaz Hirai and talked about whether we could work, cooperate with Sony. From their point of view, why would we cooperate with you? It's like, so those meetings didn't get very far, but we at least tried. But so after that meeting, or kind of as part of that, Rick Thompson, the head of the hardware group, came over and to run the group. And he anyway, a lot of great things about Rick. I'll try to make this story faster, but Rick goes around and he talks to all the OEMs, and the OEMs are just like laughing him out of the meetings, and they're like, we're not stupid. We know how the console business works. You lose money on the hardware and then you make money on the software, and you're coming in and you're saying you want us to make the hardware. It's like, yeah, that was what we wanted, So Rick comes back from this road trip. It's just like, that is not going to work. No one said yes. No one thought that was good. So bit by bit, our plan started to shift, and it started to shift, and it started to look over that year more and more and more like the other guys that we laughed at.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, you pitch the other guy's plan at the end of the year.
Exactly.
You're going to make the hardware.
Exactly. So then
they must have been pissed. The other team must have been pissed.
It's totally like a movie. Like they're like, yeah.
That's why when I tell the story of Xbox, I think it's important to go back to this beginning part and talk about that meeting, because it's really ironic what ended up happening. And they were not dumb guys. They were like ex-3DO guys, and they had worked with Dreamcast and stuff. So they just kind of got outmaneuvered in that meeting. But anyway, maybe they're happy now that they could say I told you so. But anyway. So a year goes by, and then we and our plan is like now. It hasn't gone all the way to their plan. It's like the design of the hardware still looks kind of like a PC. It's got a north bridge and a south bridge. Stuff that only technical people would really care about. It does have a hard disk still, which theirs didn't have. But in the months leading up to this final meeting, the biggest change was to take the Windows out. And that's because we went around and talked to game developers, and we're like, how much memory do you need? And they're like, we need all the memory. We're like, no, seriously, like how much? No, all of it. We want all the memory. If you don't give us all the memory, your competitors are giving us all the memory. Sony's giving us all the memory. We need all the memory. unless you're going to put in twice as much memory as Sony's and make it unaffordable. So yeah. Okay, you ready for the Valentine's Day Massacre? I've told this story so many times. I can do it in 7 minutes. All right. No. All right. So we go and we have this big meeting with Bill and Steve. This is Valentine's Day, 4:00 on Valentine's Day.
Oh, it literally was a Valentine's Day meeting.
Yes.
Called the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Later dubbed the Valentine's Day Massacre.
I don't think I know this story.
Oh, then you're in for a treat. So we walk in. So this is February 2000. Okay. The plan is to ship in November 2001, as Alex knows quite well.
Oh, yeah.
And so February 2000, we're walking in to meet with Bill and Steve to get buy-off on this plan we spent a year putting together. And we suspect there's going to be some controversy, you know, because it's a little different than what we told them we were going to do a year ago. But anyway, and this is like the most high-stakes meeting you could have at Microsoft. In the Microsoft boardroom, it's all vice presidents plus Bill and Steve. So Steve's in there kind of early, joking around with people as they're coming in, making them feel comfortable. You know, everybody's there but Bill. Way I remember it, Bill walks in. He's holding a printed copy of our PowerPoint presentation, and he throws it down on the desk. There's probably 30 people in this room, all very, very senior people. Throws it down on the desk along, you know, conference room desk and says, "This is a fucking insult to everything I've accomplished at this company."
Good opener.
Yeah. So that was the start.
So he looked at the thing.
Well, he had looked at it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he came in and let us know what he felt, which is a common thing with Bill. And he didn't have a lot of filters. So, you know, you're used to like hearing what he really, sometimes it's helpful to hear what someone really thinks.
So you're kind of on your back foot to start this off.
Exactly. So it's Robbie, me, and Jay Allard who are on system software. So Robbie and I turned to look at Jay, who's in charge of system software, because we know why he's mad. We know why Bill's mad. It's because it's not running Windows anymore. So, and Jay is normally actually really good with standing up to Bill, but at this moment, it was just like too dramatic. He's like, words are not coming out of his mouth. And so, so I'm like, fine, I'll do it. So I like step up and, you know, start to make the arguments of why we made the decisions we made and why it was important to make them this way and why this is the best plan that we, you know, you may not like the plan, but it's the best plan. Yeah, Bill just like shoots me down, and, you know, so I go down in flames, and then Robbie steps up and he tries, and then, you know, he gets shot down. Then Jay steps up. By then he's like found his tongue, and he argues, and he gets shot down, and it goes on like this for hours. It's 5:00 on Valentine's Day. It's 6:00 on Valentine's Day. It's 7:00 on Valentine's Day. And every time Bill would get tired of yelling at us, then Ballmer would take over, because, you know, Ballmer by then is like looked through the spreadsheets on these documents. You know, it's like, you're going to lose $1.5 billion. And we're like, yeah, that's the plan. The plan is to lose $1.5 billion over the next 5 years. And it's like, what? You know, and then, and you know, we're like, yeah, this is the best plan. You should have seen the bad ones, you know. And so, you know, it goes, and so it's just going Ballmer and Bill, you know, for hours. And by 7:00, you know, we're, you know, not only are we having a bad day at work, but we're in trouble at home, right? Like we've missed our Valentine's Day, you know, dinners or whatever we were going to do. You know, this is shaping up to be a bad day. And then there's like, you know, maybe between 7 and 7:30, somewhere in there, there's like kind of this lull for a moment. And, there was a guy in the room who had been writing for months, maybe years, these sort of conspiratorial memos about the threat that Sony represented to Microsoft. He was kind of one of Bill's senior advisor guys. And the memos are basically went something like this, you know, Microsoft, our whole goal of our company is a computer on every desk and in every home running Microsoft software. But look at what Sony's doing. They've put a DVR in people's living rooms. It has a hard disk in it. They've put a PlayStation in it. It has a CPU. Really, you just have to add a mouse and a keyboard and, glue those other things together, and you'd have an in-home competitor to Microsoft that would be really formidable. I mean, Sony is the number one consumer electronics company in the world at that time. And PlayStation represents 40% of the profit of Sony. So anyway, he didn't have to say all this because he'd been writing these memos. All he said was, he just said this one thing. He said, "What about Sony?" And Bill and Steve look at each other and they're like, Bill says, "What about Sony?" And then Ballmer looks and says, "Yeah, what about Sony?" And then Bill says, "I think we should do this." And then Ballmer's like, "Yeah, we should do this." And so then, I mean, my head is spinning. I mean, we've been literally yelled at for 3+ hours. And Bill is saying, "We're going to give you guys everything you want. You want a $500 million marketing campaign. You got it. You want to go move off campus to an own set of buildings. You want everything you asked for in this plan. We're giving it to you. We want you to be successful with this project. Go ahead and do it. You have our full blessing, 100%. Great job." And that was the end of the meeting. And that part took about 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
And so I walk out of there and I turn to look at Robbie and I'm like, that was the weirdest meeting I've been in 15 years at this company. And that was our official approval. February, Valentine's Day.
Wow.
2000. And so, how did I do on time? Oh, exactly 7 minutes. That was great.
Well done. That's like
level
that's how decisions get made at big companies.
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly.
So it's you just have to have the right 3 words.
Yeah, exactly.
What about
You don't
Sony?
do it, your competitor's going to do it for you. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the start. And then, then I'm just like, then I realized, holy shit, what did I just sign up for? It's like the next day you wake up and you go like, it's mid-February. I have to have games it takes 3 years to make a game. I have to have games in 18 months for a piece of hardware that doesn't exist and won't exist for until just a few months before launch. Holy shit. Yeah, that's when the real fun began, right, Alex?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was I think a lot of things happened miraculously in those 18 months. A lot of people had to just do their thing.
We needed miracles to get it done.
Yeah. For all the parts to come together. I mean, not everything worked. I mean, there were plenty of games that didn't make it or whatever, but a lot of people had to sort of, I mean, this is my memory of that time in our studio, was that we put all the teams together. We put people in charge of stuff who hadn't been in charge of stuff before, and 90% of everybody delivered.
Well, we needed one great game and a handful of good games, and that's what we had, and you guys delivered the great game, and that's what made all the difference. I think if we didn't have Halo, we wouldn't be talking about Xbox anymore.
No. Has the business, do you know, like, has Xbox made money yet?
I don't know no, I have no idea. I left so we launched in November 2001. I left in January 2004. So not just a few years after. So we were still on the lose $1.5 billion plan when I was there.
But right on schedule.
Which we were struggling to stay within our budget of only losing $1.5 billion, as I recall.
Well,
anyway.
The red ring probably didn't help.
Well, yeah, that's why we brought the 360 out so quickly, because we couldn't price reduce the Xbox. That was like one of the things we gave up when we were designing it quickly, is we didn't own the IP to any of the parts of it. So we couldn't combine like the CPU and the GPU together to make a smaller, cheaper part.
Right,
Plus we had this hard disk that was very expensive. And that hard disks don't get cheaper, they just get bigger. You know, because
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of mechanical stuff you have to have there. Plus, you know, we weren't nearly as good, in my opinion, as Sony was about like cost reduction. That's just like, I mean, they're a consumer electronics company. That's what they do all day long.
Yeah, right.
And they have, you know, they can buy parts in bulk to use between TVs and consoles and all the stuff that we couldn't do. You know, so it was going to always be tough for us to match them on price.
Well, a lot of good stuff came out of it.
Halo 2600 and just how you got into doing what you're doing now with your fund, with OneUp Ventures, and those are two different topics. I think did Halo 2600 must have come first, right?
Yeah.
Was that you like just like, I'm bored, I got to do something? It's like, I'm going to pull out my old Atari.
Not really. You know, it's like you said, like after I left, I just kind of started, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wanted to be home for my kids. My first son, Xander, was born right after the Japanese launch of the Xbox. I came home from the Japanese launch and he was born the next month. That's why he's named Xander. He's named after Xbox, Xander. And then I quit in 2004 when my second son, Jasper, was about to be born. So I wanted to be around with them as they were growing up, and but I got sucked into a lot of advisor and board stuff too on the side. I started a company called Figureprints, and me and 3 other friends made these 3D prints of World of Warcraft characters because I was playing a lot of World of Warcraft back then.
I remember that.
That was a fun company.
I remember that too. Yeah. You would send in your character and they'd print it to you.
Exactly.
We'd send it to you.
Yeah, we'd print exactly your character in the pose that you picked with all your gear. Yeah, all color 3D printed. It was really new technology then. So I was running that company on the side, plus doing advisor and consulting stuff. And I was doing some talks at different game conferences and things like that. And I was in Philadelphia for some conference. They asked me to come out and speak, and I gave a talk. And afterwards, somebody came up to me because I'd mentioned working on the Atari 800, and they said, "Have you seen this new book? It's called Racing the Beam." It's about the Atari 2600, the home console. You know, the 800 is equivalent to like a Commodore 64 or an Apple II or that kind of thing. It's a computer with 48K or 64K RAM. The 2600 came out in 1975. No, sorry, 77. I'm going to get in trouble with people. 77. And because I know you're out there. I mean, everything was expensive then. So the Atari 2600 is like, I mean, the 800 that I worked on is so much more advanced. Okay, just to give you an example, an 800, you might have 48,000 bytes of memory. On the 2600, you have 128 bytes of RAM. 128. Whoa. That's less than one tweet.
Really?
Yes. Less than one tweet of RAM. And so anyway, so this guy at this conference says, "You should read this book." And so I got the book and I was like, holy shit, I can't believe people could even make a game on this machine. It's so limited. The biggest the program can be is 4K total, unless you do this bank switching stuff that people did later. I wanted to make like, let me not jump ahead. So anyway, so 128 bytes of RAM, 4K. It's hard to even describe it without getting technical, but the bottom line is there's not enough memory to have a memory map display. So any machine after the 2600, there's a place you could store a number in memory, and something would show on the screen. Okay, and that's like how you draw stuff on the screen. You store numbers in memory, and things show up on the screen, and then you change them quickly, and then you have a game. The 2600, and this is the reason the book's called Racing the Beam. You have to know where the electron beam is as it scans across the display at all times, and you have to, and that's the way a CRT terminal works. 60 times a second, the electron beam scans all the way across the screen, back and forth, down to the bottom, and then goes back to the top. You have to, in your code, know where that beam is at any time, and you have to change these registers very quickly to get something to show on the screen.
You're like turning a flashlight on and off as it's being waved in front
That's
of
a
somebody's
great way.
face.
That's exactly. That's a great way to say it. And you're running on a 6502, which is a very old, very slow microprocessor. There's only 76 clock cycles for the time that the electron beam goes across the screen once and then comes back. Every assembly instruction takes anywhere from 2 to 6 clock cycles. So you're going to get maybe 20 assembly instructions every time the line goes across. And so, and these are, I mean, for people who, I mean, I'm sure nobody in the audience knows at this point, but like an assembly instruction is like add two 8-bit numbers together, add two numbers from 0 to 255, store the result in this location.
Yeah. Really
Test.
Basic.
So
really basic.
Yeah. It's like, so
it's like what you can do on a calculator.
Right. So you have a tiny amount of memory to work with, RAM to work with. You have a larger, but still very small, like 4K, 4,000 bytes is like a page and a half of text. 128 bytes is like one tweet. And you have a very slow machine where you have to do things very quickly. So that's why if you're into this stuff, like if you make games, it's really fun to read this book, Racing the Beam. And so
I got to write that down. I got to check it out.
Yeah. Ian Bogost and Nick Montfort are the two authors.
Cool title.
Yeah. So anyway, so I read this book and I'm like, wow, this is way worse than I thought it would be. I wonder if I could make something, if I could like play with it a little. So I looked online and there was actually a little emulator debugger that some fans had set up. And I'm like, okay, I just want to get like one thing on the screen. And that took me about a month just to get, but what one thing should I make? And so I'm like, so I opened up Paint and I started to play, and like we established before, I'm not very creative at this stuff, so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to draw an 8-bit version of the Master Chief. So I just went in Paint and I did a little pixel drawing of a little 8-bit, he's 8 pixels wide, right? Could
green.
Be a little taller, made him green, have a little yellow mask. And, anyway, so a month later, I have that on the screen. And then over the next couple of months, I make it so he can run around. He's got a little 2 animations, swaps between. And then I gave him a gun so he could shoot. And then I made a little enemy and then I made it so the enemy could shoot back. So, and then I was like pretty much done. I was like, okay, that was fun. And I go to GDC in March 2010, and I'm walking through the expo floor, and I happen to run into some guys from the game business, Chris Charla, Mike Micah. For people who don't know, Mike Micah runs a company called Other Ocean. It was just acquired by Atari, actually, and they did a lot of retro stuff. And I've known these guys over the years. Chris Charla, for people who don't know, runs ID at Xbox, the Xbox indie stuff for the last many years. But they were standing there with Ian Bogost, one of the authors of the book, and a couple guys, like the guy who wrote Pac-Man for the 2600, whose name I'm spacing on, and another 2600 programmer from back in the day. Like these guys, I now appreciate that these guys are like gods among men, because I'm a pretty hotshot programmer. And I'm like, oh,
I mean, all those fish. Yeah.
I mean, I wrote 6502 games for the 800. I mean, that's not that easy to do. But anyway, but this is like a whole nother level, So I'm talking about, I'm like, wow, this is such a coincidence. I'm like, I read your book, it's awesome. I've been playing on this 2600 emulator. I can't believe what you guys accomplished. And they're like, well, what are you doing with it? And I'm like, oh, I just made a little Master Chief so I could just see, have him running around. And Chris Charla looks at me, so he's like, you're making Halo for the 2600? And I'm like, no, I'm not making Halo for the 2600. It's just a little like tech demo. And then Mike is like, you got to do it. And I'm like, I got to do what? And they're like, Charlie's like, you got to finish the game. It's like, you got to finish the game, man. I'm like, it's not even a game. It's like, no, you got to finish it. It's a moral imperative. And I'm like, and they're like, how do I get out of this? I'm like, oh, I'm not really that good at this, pixel art. And Mike was like, I'll draw your pixel art. And then the other guys are like, we'll be your testers, and then they're like, they like make this whole decision. And I'm like, wait, for me, for the next 6 months of my life. Anyway, so I walk out of GDC with no choice but this, commandment to actually turn this into a real game. And so I, like, what am I going to do? And so I was basically like, well, I love the, adventure back in the game where you move from room to room.
Oh, yeah.
2600. And I'm like, what if I combine sort of Halo with adventure? And anyway, and it was this whole long, difficult, super fun process. I've given whole talks on this, but yeah, and I got it done in time for a Classic Gaming Expo in Vegas that summer, so it was about 6 months start to finish, which was typical of the development times in the old days for these games. And I really got to experience, by the last couple months, I'm like completely out of RAM, completely out of ROM. And I'm not done. And every time I go to change something, I have to go back and rewrite some routines to find a few more bytes so I can put them, somewhere else. And it was just like, once you've rewritten the same routine 6 or 7 times, you're like, well, last time I thought I had taken everything out of this and I got to look at it again.
I got to say, like the most memorable class I took in college was a assembly language class because of kind of that, which is, you know everything. Like today, like exactly. we're doing stuff in UEFN, and I wrote a bitmap font renderer, and I have no idea how much RAM it uses.
Yeah,
there's no way to profile it. I can't tell. I got no idea.
There's something about working at that scale there's a kind of a weird beauty to it. It's just kind of hard to describe. It's like everything is like at its limit. And you see some of the tricks that people have developed over the years where like, who needs a stack? You point the stack pointer at these control registers, and then you save a few bytes because you're just pushing stuff onto the stack, but you're really changing these control registers that make the sprites be in the right place. And it's like, if you didn't have that trick, there's no way you could get it done in the 20 instructions that you had. You're like,
yes, well, I think all the older listeners, the younger listeners, their eyes just glazed over.
Yeah, we've lost them all. But anyway, the point is, I shipped the game. It's out there. It's a real 2600 game.
Can we download the ROMs?
Well, it's physical, right? It's
like
a physical copy.
Yeah. So they were selling physical copies up until Atari bought the Atari Age website, and then Atari got nervous about whether they'd get sued by Microsoft around the Halo IP rights. So it's not for sale right now, but you can easily find a ROM image for it, and you can run that.
The cover's cool.
Yeah. It has a title screen, which was really fun to make. It plays a little bit of Marty's music.
But don't tell Marty; he'll come after you.
Oh, I meant Microsoft's music. Sorry, it plays a little bit of Microsoft's music. Marty and I
right now, dude.
If you want to buy one of the original ones on eBay, yeah.
I do.
But
so I don't know how much they go for. Yeah, but we'll put a link to it. There's a ROM image somewhere. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, it's on his wiki. If you go to your wiki, that's what it says you're known for.
There you go. Unlike most people, I didn't write my own wiki, so it has a random collection of stuff.
I didn't think that was it. It's got a spot there for notable work. Like it's a notable work section, and that's the headline.
It doesn't say Excel or Word.
No, or Xbox or a Halo. It just says it says Halo 26. Very specific
figure prints. Anyway, I need to find some people to work on my Wikipedia.
Well,
page.
I gotta say, 1,000,000% refreshing to that you are an exec who ran a $1.5 billion business for Microsoft. We're not going to
Negative
say
value.
whether it was in parentheses or not, but that you're coding in assembly language and dealing with the 120 byte RAM that boggles the mind. That's
just
amazing.
doing the stuff I love. That's the story of my life.
So quick before we let you go, because we've kept you way over, and you probably have very important meetings to do.
We're burning your money right now.
Yeah. But so when did OneUp Ventures start? And did that start? How did that start?
I guess maybe it was 2018 or so. I was kicking around the industry doing a lot of advisor and board stuff, and I got a message from the guys from PUBG in Korea. They had just launched PUBG and it was doing really well, and they were thinking about the future and that they might want to get connected to more game developers in the West, and thought a venture fund might be a good way to do that. They were called PUBG Corp at that time. They were part of a bigger thing that we now know as Krafton. And I met with them at PAX. They came out to PAX here in the Seattle area, and they talked to me about this, and I'm like, so the thing is, like, I can't say that too much about this, but I've been part of, for like a dozen years or so, of this group of indie developers that a friend of mine started, and it's supposed to be kind of a secret group, because he's worried, the founder's worried about people feeling bad that they're not part of it.
Yeah. Wait a second. What?
Yeah. What
exactly.
about me? Like, I know we just met, but still.
So the whole idea of this group is that just they're all running heads of game companies, and they all just kind of support each other and exchange information and help each other. And having been part of it for a long time, it's some big game companies have grown out of it, but it also, it's just really meaningful to be part of. And so when the guys from PUBG/Krafton approached me and asked if I would start this venture fund so they could meet more game developers, I said, well, I would do it if I could do it like this. And I explained what I get out of this other group and why I think it's important and meaningful. They were kind of like, well, we're not quite sure what you're talking about, but we like you, so yeah, we're gonna do it. So that was the start of OneUp Ventures. I immediately, probably my second or third call was to Kelly Wallach, who had, created and grown the Indie Mega Booth over many years. And I talked to her about what I wanted to do around community and building community among founders. And she was really into it and offered to come on board part-time. I brought another friend on part-time to be to do the fund administration stuff. That's Chris Wheaton, our kind of finance legal guy. And that's the whole team for Fund One. And then, so over 3 years, we did what we said we were going to do. We made 50 investments into 50 game companies and formed the heads of those companies into a community where they can all exchange information to help each other. Then we raised the second fund, and we're halfway through doing it again, a little more than halfway. So our Fund Two, we've made 20-ish, 25-ish investments out of Fund Two. We're out there investing at seed stage. We always invest the same amount, $500K. We need a lead investor because there's just two of us. So we need people to do the real work.
You need people to kick the tires and make sure that it's legit.
Yeah, exactly. To do the due diligence and write the, legal documents and stuff like that. But Kelly came on full time for Fund Two. And so for Fund Two, we've been making all the decisions together. And we just announced that Emily Greer came on part-time. So we're up to sort of 4 people, 2 full-time, 2 part-time. So it's super fun. We have, this portfolio of a lot of different game companies, and we just, our work, Kelly and my work, is trying to get the community to share information with each other and help each other and make the community an important place. Every year we do a fun retreat somewhere in the world. This year we're going to Santa Fe, and we'll be out there soon. Hopefully I'll see Alex there.
I will be there. I'm looking forward to it. That's awesome. It's a very different kind of environment, I will say, from other investors that I've either, done business with or no. And it's got that that vibe, the community vibe.
Thank you.
Which is awesome. Yeah. All right, Ed. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Valentine's Day Massacre. I can't believe I never heard that story.
I'm amazed.
That's a good one.
Fourth Curtain exclusive. Nice to meet you, Ed. Great stories. Good
Well,
stories.
nice to meet you, Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah. Really, really like cool stuff. Yeah.
Thanks for letting me talk about some other stuff too, like fish. Really important.
Yes.
Classic.
And we'll see you around.
All right.
I'm remembering what you said at the beginning in our before the conversation we just had with Ed.
About hoarding plastic?
No, about picking favorites. That I made the mistake of doing that once. I put a birthday message on Instagram to Ivy that said, to my favorite kid.
Yeah, the best.
Got in so much trouble.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
No.
Every once in a while, I'll say it to my kids and they'll use it. It's like a weapon.
Yes. Oh, of course. Of course.
You know, in his story, like one of the things that I didn't even think about the screensaver, the fish one. Like, I guess when he started talking about it, I was like, oh, snap, he did that. Like, and it's like, that was an amazing thing. Like, I remember getting that.
Me too.
And I got it from a BBS. I didn't get it from like the store or anything.
Oh,
like someone like my friend would just connect to a BBS and then he would get everything. And that was one of the things in the pile.
Do you need to describe what BBS is for the kids?
Oh, yeah.
Do they know what
a
that is?
computer terminal that someone would set up with a hard drive that probably had like
all sorts of illegal stuff
too, but also just like shareware, like Doom. Like that's how you would get the Doom shareware.
And you would call it on the telephone with a modem. So you'd be on the computer, and if your mom like picked up the phone while you had the modem going, it would mess up the connection. Yeah, because
the data bits would be lost and it would hang up. And the cool thing is these computers were set up by community people, and there was no way of knowing where these were. Like other BBSs would tell they would have like a text file that would have other phone numbers with like ASCII art. Like,
well, yeah, Chris Barrett was telling us about his illegalware site that he was operating that says something crypt. Was it Crypt? Spectre's Crypt? We registered the URL, so I should go look. I have the URL for it.
But yeah, like, so there's like what, 4 phone lines, sometimes 3. So not that many people could connect. Anyways, that's how I got the screensaver. And I loved it. It was like, man.
I had the After Dark screensaver pack.
Yeah, I had the After Dark one too. Was it that one was on PC? Or was it on Mac too?
It was on Mac. It was definitely on Mac. I listening to Ed talk about making a 2600 cartridge was fascinating. I want to read that book, Riding the Beam.
Oh yeah, that's a cool title.
I think that's going to end up being the title of this episode, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think so.
Let's do that. Riding the Beam.
I'll call someone. We'll set that up.
By the way, it's funny when you go to his wiki, that's what he's known for. It says,
yeah, I know.
I'm like, what?
Not like, launching the Xbox or whatever. It's like Halo 2600. Yeah, that's awesome.
I was thinking about the Excel thing too. That's crazy. Like how many people use that software,
Well, it was very interesting that he noted that team was 12 people when he was on that team.
Yeah, and billions use it, right? Like it's not millions anymore.
Oh, I don't know.
Like it's got to have gotten to billions of users, no?
Oh, you mean cumulative over its lifetime? I'm sure.
Yeah, over its lifetime. Yeah, like billions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Use that software. I mean, it comes on every computer basically.
I'll say though, I was really skeptical of this whole Google Apps thing when they launched that like 10 years ago, but I kind of just fire up Google Sheets now. I feel guilty.
Yeah, well, Microsoft is doing that too. They're going online. There's you can go to their website, and I really like their browser. I know this is going to get me in trouble, but I kind of like the browser, the Edge. It has the AI assistant in there, which is really, really cool. It's weird. It's like you can ask it a question and it goes and does.
Is there a do you use Midjourney or any of those art
Yeah, I use Midjourney. We can't use it for work. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can't use it for any of our shipping projects yet.
I use it for my playing card stuff, but that's it.
I just wondering if there's any of those that you can actually talk to. You know, you give it a prompt and it gives you an image.
ChatGPT.
Will that do that? Where you like, hey, give me a picture of an elephant riding a skateboard, and then you're like, oh, actually, no, can you make it a surfboard?
Yeah, I think you can. And you can. I think the trick there is that you get the voice to text feature enabled, so it seems like a conversation.
Oh, I don't care about the actual like talking. I just mean the iterative.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen people. I don't know which one it is. I want to say it's ChatGPT or I can't remember, but I've seen like threads where they're like, make a dog riding a skateboard. And then it's like, okay, now make it cute. And then it like makes it cute. It's like, now make it like The Simpsons. And it just, it's iterative.
Oh yeah, I have seen those. Yeah. And they just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah. It was an elephant, by the way, on a skateboard, but okay. Okay. Thank you everybody for joining us again this week. Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Ed Freeze. And I hope we prepped you a little bit for the big reset.
Yeah.
Which who knows when it'll come.
We're like living through it right now.
We'll see you next time, everybody.
See you later, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Fourth Curtain Podcast. The Fourth Curtain is a production of Fourth Curtain Media with community management by Doug Zartman. Lovingly edited and mastered by Bryen Hensley at Noise Floor Sound Solutions in Chicago. To get a peek at upcoming episodes or to send in questions to the show, visit our site at thefourthcurtain.com. And be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.